So I've actually been quietly using the iPhone 15 as one of my main devices just so I can get an idea of what it looks like to go with the cheapest or entry-level iPhone 15 and see what that experience is like compared to now the $400 more expensive iPhone 15 Pro Max. And honestly, I was very pleasantly surprised, and there's a lot more that meets the eye with this iPhone 15. So in this video, I want to do my iPhone 15 long-term review and see how it stacks up in a silo as well as how it stacks up with the rest of the iPhone lineup. So without further ado, let's hop right into it. But first, a quick word from our channel partner, iMazing.
Mac is brought to you by iMazing 3, now in beta for macOS. iMazing 3 is a native Mac app featuring a complete architectural overhaul. It's got a brand new UI that's faster and even easier to use with your iPhone, iPad, or iPod. Of course, all the life-saving staples are here. Photo extractions, text message exporting, quick file transfers between iPhone or iPad and macOS or Windows, iOS local backup management with device snapshots, and tons more. It's so good, iMazing put together a teaser video. Time, use the coupon 9to5 iMazing3 at checkout to get 30% off until the end of October. Special thanks to iMazing for sponsoring 9to5 Mac.
So if you just want the quick summary of the updated iPhone 15, I actually think the iPhone 15 was a more substantial upgrade in comparison to the 15 Pro and the Pro Max. I know the Pro Max got the 5x zoom and the titanium finish and things like that, but what Apple did for the 15 lineup was essentially bring all of the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max features and brought them over to the iPhone 15 lineup, which again just adds more value in terms of what you get from a performance standpoint, a battery standpoint, display tech, the dynamic island, and things like that. So if you just want the synopsis, you're basically getting the same chipset. So the A16 Bionic is now from the 14 Pro and Pro Max into the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus, so that's going to be super efficient and powerful. You got the 48 megapixel shooter on the rear. Obviously, it's still just a dual camera setup, but you still get the main 48 megapixel shooter, which is awesome. You get a nice little update to the design, which gives you the rounded edges and much more comfortable to hold in the hand. They brought over a dynamic island to the 15 and 15 Plus, which is much earlier than I personally anticipated, but that's great to see. So now the entire lineup is uniform and there's no segregation between, hey, I have the expensive one and hey, I have the cheaper one. So they all kind of look the same from the front. And then lastly, they also got USB-C over to the iPhone 15. So that, in a nutshell, in my opinion, is a much bigger upgrade going from 14 to 15 than it is from 14 Pro to 15 Pro. So that was just a quick synopsis. If you guys want to jump off the video now, go for it. But I want to go a little bit more in depth on each one of these categories as my long-term review using this phone for about a month now. So I do want to dive a little deeper into the design aspects of the 15 and 15 Plus. So at a glance, if you're looking at them from far away, to most people, they look relatively the same. It has the same dual camera setup on the rear. It's still kind of just a rectangular slab of glass, but if you are holding them side by side, they are getting the same design language updates that the 15 Pro and Pro Max are getting. So instead of it being super kind of squared off with that industrial design, it still has that industrial design, just with some more rounded and curved edges, which is great to see. So it's much more comfortable to hold in the hand, especially because I'm so used to the 15 Pro Max, which is the larger model, and I've been using the regular iPhone 15. So it's very pleasurable to hold in one hand. I'm able to kind of reach across the entire screen with only one finger. You don't really need two hands to be wielding this device. So the 6.1 iPhone 15 with those nice rounded edges is a great phone to hold for long extended periods of time. And then from the color standpoint, I went with the green colorway, and they do have this new satin finish on the rear, which gives us this nice kind of matte finish, which is nice to have, and it doesn't feel like it's just glass. It feels like a completely different material, even though it is made out of complete glass. And then obviously, this one did not get that titanium update. That's kind of reserved for the iPhone Pro models. This one is still made out of aluminum, but at the end of the day, it's just an iPhone. It's going to be in a case for 85% of you for the most part. So, but overall, if you're just using it caseless, it is a great phone to have, and it just feels very premium still in the hand. So now let's move over to the front of the actual iPhone and talk about that display, because this is kind of what I'm calling DisplayGate, right? Apple, again, has kept us at 60 hertz. And for the most part, maybe not for you and me watching this video, maybe not for the people that are kind of in the comments, but for the average consumer, the fact that this is a 60 hertz phone, it doesn't really matter to them because A, they don't really have a reference point unless they're using an iPad Pro from 2018 or newer, or they've had one of the older Pro models like the 13 Pro or 14 Pro. There's not going to be a frame of reference to know like, hey, what is 60 hertz and what's 120 hertz. The performance on the iPhone 15 is good enough to kind of emulate almost to the 120 hertz because it does have that 120 hertz sample refresh rate, which means when you kind of input it, it feels a little bit faster, versus the Pro models do have 240. Not the actual display itself, but the sample rate. But again, it is a 60 hertz display on the iPhone 15, and I thought it would make the dynamic island animations look a little bit laggy, especially coming from the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and also from other iOS devices or iPadOS devices like the iPad Pro and things like that. But the dynamic island animations are still very fluid, they're very easy to see, they're very playful still. There's no kind of like choppiness to those animations, which I've noticed personally. And I've held these phones side by side, and if you do hold them side by side, you do have a little bit of a difference. You can tell that it is 120 hertz versus a 60 hertz, but is that really worth it to most people, and is that something that people care about? If it's snappy, if the performance is good, if it charges, if you're able to use your phone how it's intended to be used, most people are not going to care. Now, yes, it is an $800 device, and there are $100 Android phones or $200 Android phones that give you 90, 120, 144 hertz displays, but again, I'll take a 60 hertz display from Apple over, 120 hertz, $200 budget phone. That's just my 2 cents. But what is nice from the display is that we did get an updated from a brightness level, so we now get up to 2000 nits of brightness, so viewing angles, being able to see this thing in direct sunlight when it's outdoors, it's really a pleasure to use. Again, I keep using that word because everything just works correctly. There isn't any barriers to entry. I haven't had a moment where like, oh, this is annoying to use. And this kind of used to happen with the older iPhones where you would kind of go out in the middle of a bright summer day and then the sun would be too powerful for me to actually be able to use my phone comfortably. But with this 2000 nit brightness display, that has gone out the window. I can use this phone in any situation with pretty much any level of brightness. And then also you did notice, like I mentioned earlier in the video, Dynamic Island has come over. Now, some people are still kind of on the fence about it. Is it a gimmick? Is it something useful? At the end of the day, you could still get all the information that you're getting from that dynamic island on the older iPhones like the 13 or 14, but it just looks a little bit nicer in my opinion. It's playful. Not everything has to have a super productive and efficient kind of reasoning behind it. It's just something fun. It's different. It's kind of like their design language, similar to how Google has their kind of visor on the rear camera to make it look like a Google Pixel. Now everybody knows that this dynamic island is coming from an iPhone. So if you're just looking at it from the front, you don't know what phone it is, you'll be able to see from a branding perspective like, hey, that's a dynamic island, that is an iPhone. But overall, I'm a big fan of dynamic island. I like all the little kind of glanceable information you can get with Flighty and the music application and Spotify and everything in between, being able to see like your Uber order coming in with live notifications and live activities. So dynamic island is always a welcome addition. And again, I'm surprised that it came to the 15 models so soon after it was debuted with the 14 Pro and Pro Max. So again, Apple is kind of just bringing everything down from the 14 Pro and Pro Max to the iPhone 15 aside from that ProMotion display. So from a performance standpoint, this year's iPhone 15 and 15 Plus got the old A16 Bionic chip that was in the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. So the same most expensive iPhone from last year has the same performance as the newest iPhone 15 from this year, which is, I think, a great value add, right? You're getting the most expensive chip from the highest end version of the iPhone from a year ago and putting it into the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus. So performance is going to be snappy, efficiency is going to be great, battery life has been absolutely amazing, has really surprised me overall, even on the smaller iPhone. And I hear that the 15 Plus is going to be the battery champ of this iPhone lineup because it's a 60 Hz display, has the older chip, so it's just going to be ultra efficient in making sure that the battery life is extended all the way through. But again, this is going to be the latest iPhone that Apple has. So this is going to be the best iPhone to use from a performance standpoint. It's snappy. iOS 17 and 17.1 that has just released has been making the experience of using this iPhone very easy to use. Everything works. Multitasking works well. You can have 18 apps open at the same time. You have multitasking with music and the dynamic island while navigating on Google Maps and maybe tweeting on X and things like that. So this iPhone is going to be able to do everything that you throw at it, from little simple tasks like email, iMessage, and taking photos, to more intensive tasks like maybe editing a video in LumaFusion on your iPhone, or even gaming a little bit, as Apple has touted that gaming on the A16 Bionic is going to be almost console level like if you really want to use it that way. So from a performance standpoint, at the iPhone 15 base level, this checks every single box that you will want because it can accomplish every single task at the end of the day. But that is a great segue into the USB-C port because it goes hand in hand with this A16 Bionic. Compared to the A17 Pro that's in the 15 Pro and Pro Max, this unfortunately does not have a USB 3 controller, meaning that you're still stuck on USB-C or USB 2.0 speeds. For most people that are buying this new iPhone, it's not going to be a big deal because they're probably not even going to use that port. They wirelessly charge, and if they do plug in, it's going to be more so just to charge that phone itself and not to transfer a bunch of data. So for me personally, obviously the 15 Pro and Pro Max are going to be more important to me because I want to be able to output as much data as quickly as possible out of those things because I use a lot of video recording and filmmaking activities on that iPhone. But with the 15 regular and the 15 Plus, You're not going to really need that, and if you do need that, then you're going to have to upgrade to the 15 Pro and Pro Max, and you know who you are when it comes to that situation. But for most people at the iPhone 15 level, that USB-C port is going to be a net positive because it's going to allow them to open the door to a bunch of different accessories. So even though it's not a 3.0 speed port, you can still use USB-C dongles, be able to connect via HDMI, have a USB-C hub if you want to, be able to extend it to an extended monitor, plug in an SD card reader. So it's going to be a lot easier if you are in those kind of similar workflows, but you don't need that ultra fast kind of pro level speed when it comes to that USB-C port. And now to round off my thoughts on this iPhone, let's talk about the cameras for a second. As I mentioned, we did get that 48 megapixel shooter that we got on last year's Pro models. Again, 1 year sooner, or maybe even 2 years sooner than I anticipated Apple bringing the 48 megapixel shooter, because now you have an awesome camera in the rear of the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus. Now, a lot of these camera shots are going to be amazing, right? If you're in a well-lit situation, if you're taking pictures of the outdoor landscape, the sun is out, it's going to be hard to kind of compare or compete with these kind of cameras, but that's the same case for the Google Pixel 8 Pro and the latest Samsung phone and the Google Pixel Fold and things like that. Like, these cameras are now more subjective than objective, so it's kind of like what you like versus kind of numbers on a spec sheet at this point. But video on the iPhone 15 is still unmatched in my opinion. I mean, a lot of companies are getting closer, but video is king on the iPhones, and this 48 megapixel camera just takes you to that next level, which is nice to see. And then what's nice about the 48 megapixel shooter is that it's now doing that binning thing where even though we only have two cameras, so we have the ultra wide and the wide, you can actually bin into 12 megapixels in the center of that 1x wide shot and get kind of like a 2x optical zoom technically. You're not really virtually zooming in or digitally zooming in, you're actually just binning into those inner kind of 12 megapixels of the 48 megapixel camera to give you that 2x optical zoom. So technically, even though you have two cameras, you have 3 focal lengths before you actually get into that digital zoom, which kind of gets a little bit grainy after you extend it past 10x. But that is my 2 cents on the camera. It's going to be the best camera to have in your pocket at that time, the quickest to point and shoot. You're going to be extremely happy with the shots that you get out of this camera. I mean, I'm not messing too much with any settings or things like that. I grab this iPhone camera, pull it out, take a picture of what I want to take a picture of, put it in my pocket, and then I'm confident in knowing that, hey, this is a great shot that I have in my camera. I don't really need to look at it until later in the day. But that is my 2 cents on the camera. I'm happy that they brought over that 48 megapixel camera, and you can shoot in Pro RAW and get those 48 megapixel shots, even though it will be about 150 megabytes per shot. So who should get this iPhone 15, right? This iPhone 15 is for the person that's walking into the AT&T store, walking into the T-Mobile store. They're coming from an iPhone 12 or an iPhone 13 or iPhone 11, and they just want the latest iPhone at the cheapest price, right? If it's obviously not the iPhone SE because that one's a little bit cheaper and it doesn't look like any of the other ones, but this one is going to be the one that most people are going to get. A lot of those carriers are doing that. Hey, trade in your old iPhone and you get this iPhone for absolutely free. So carriers are going to get these iPhone 15 into people's hands, and people are going to be very happy with what they get out of this iPhone. Is it a complete change compared to the last 2-3 iPhones? No, at the end of the day, it's still iOS. You'll still be able to kind of do everything that you need to do. It's going to be a very familiar experience, but the hardware is nice to have. USB-C, the A16 Bionic, the 48 megapixel camera, and the fact that now we have Dynamic Island on the 15 will give you a sense of, oh wow, like this is something new, right? I've had the same iPhone for the last 3 years, from the iPhone 10 to the iPhone 14 essentially. So getting the Dynamic Island is going to give you something new to look at, which makes it feel a little bit newer than it is. And obviously the updated design is a much more comfortable hold in the hand for long extended periods of time. But that's going to do for this video, everybody. Overall, I'm extremely happy with the iPhone 15. I'm still going to be using the iPhone 15 Pro Max as my main device because that just fits my workflow a little bit better. But let me know in the comment down below what you think about the iPhone 15. Is that something that you guys picked up? Which iPhone do you currently have right now? Are you looking to upgrade? What are the reasons why? I'd love to discuss this stuff in the comments down below. But if you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. And if you guys want to watch more iOS, iPadOS, or macOS content, click on one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando. I'm out of here, everybody.
9to5Mac is brought to you by iMazing 3, now in beta for macOS. It's got a brand new UI that's faster and even easier to use with your iPhone, iPad, or iPod. For a limited time, use the coupon 9to5iMazing3 at checkout to get 30% off until the end of October. Special thanks to iMazing for sponsoring 9to5Mac.